There's still a lot to be gained for the Big Ten tournament. Or is there? What's the latest projection for UCLA in the NCAA tournament?
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. This episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. But where we get started, the UCLA men closed out the season with some style, blowing out USC at home at Pauley Pavilion. Good crowd, a lot of energy, and UCLA played like they had something to play for. Last time they played USC, it was a quad one opportunity on the road. SC was still in the thick of things, potentially for an NCAA tournament run if they went through February and March a little bit better. UCLA played without their leading score, and then next thing you know, UCLA won that game a little bit closer. We saw a lot of Adaimara. A couple months later, month and a half later, UCLA puts the beat down on the Trojans. They were going with a whimper, where it was USC, which means UCLA had a quad 2 win, and now the resume continues to build a little bit. The quad 1 resume is still for UCLA 9-7 overall, 5-1 in quad 2, 1-1 in quad 3, and 7-0 in quad 4. That's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of stats I threw at you. Maybe you don't even know what that means. Maybe you don't care. Overall, what it means is based on help from the rest of the Big Ten, UCLA became a 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament. I was thinking heading into the weekend with what needed to happen, 2 teams ahead of them needed to lose, and then a team in front of them needed to win, all just for UCLA to get a tiebreaker to go in their favor. I thought that was unlikely, and they'd be a 4 seed. And if SC came to play, the Bruins could have fallen to the 7 seed. Instead, UCLA gets the extra day of rest. Now they move themselves with a better opportunity to play a good team. It's likely that they play the likes of Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin is going to take on the winner of Minnesota and Northwestern. And if Wisconsin wins that game, or whoever wins that game, they'll play the Bruins early Friday morning here on the West Coast. So generally, it could be another quad 1 win, or not win, that's a little too far, quad 1 opportunity for the Bruins in this Big Ten tournament. And with them already being the 4 seed, that's going to help them. If you look at the standings, you're like, all right, most likely, even if they lose, they're going to lose to a good team, and that won't hurt the resume. I looked at Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology. What did that beatdown of USC bring? What did the latest couple days of action in conference tournaments lead for UCLA? I think you're all going to want to hear this. UCLA has been hovering around being the 6th seed. All right. The hope was that they maybe play a first round on the West Coast, or they play in the West Regional, and they can get to a second round on the West Coast, which is played in San Francisco. All UCLA wants is to have a favorable first-round matchup, navigate less travel in the first couple of rounds, and just maybe, with the right matchup going to run in the NCAA tournament. Well, right now, Joe Lunardi, projections I trust the most, has pushed UCLA on this day, March 11th, that I'm dropping this podcast. He has updated this very early in the morning. UCLA is a 6th seed in Denver. Awesome. In the West Regional. Love that. Now, the funny thing is they would be playing VCU, so that would be a very sneaky, tough matchup first round. Then they'd potentially be playing the winner of a Kentucky, and Kentucky is a 3 seed. I think is very overrated, right? Kentucky, I believe, they are very banged up with injury. They got a lot of injuries right now. If Kentucky's a 3 seed, that's a very winnable matchup. Now, the NCAA is going to have a lot of different things to deal with how they maneuver these matchups. But if it's a Kentucky in the first round or a second round, I love that. But you're playing on the West Coast. You get Kentucky away from Lexington, away from Wichita, Kansas, away from those eastern part of the United States regionals. I love that. And to play in San Francisco on the West Coast, that would be entertaining. Not only in the first round, but in the second weekend as well. If this is where UCLA is projected with their beatdown, a win over Wisconsin, or a 1 win in the Big Ten tournament, I think is what UCLA would absolutely love. Now, the less they play in Indianapolis, not a bad thing. They play 1 game and they're out, not a bad thing to hope for right now for UCLA. You get a big win, that could solidify themselves 2 West Coast weekends and they only have to travel just to get to the Final Four. I know I'm way ahead of myself there, but that's what UCLA needs. A favorable first-round matchup, an overrated seed in the 3 or 4 ranking, right? If UCLA moves up to the 5, there's a lot of teams outside the top 4 or 5, even though I want to think some of the SEC teams are overrated, but still those top 4 or 5 teams, really, really good. But if you're getting Kentucky as an SEC 3 seed, overrated, a little hurt. If you get one of those, a 4 seed, it's like, all right, who might you play? Well, depending on how you're slotted, maybe you go take on a 4 seed from what Joe Lunardi has, Clemson. All right, that'd be interesting. If you look around the country in this bracketology that Joe Lunardi's released, it's unique. There's 3 4 seeds that are Big Ten teams, and UCLA can't play a Big Ten team in the first 2 rounds. They want all the NCAA selection committee, their guidelines, you face them in the Sweet 16 and no way earlier. Okay? So UCLA, for their resume to improve so much to move to the 4 line or the 5 line, for everything to be maneuvered the way it needs to be so that they avoid conference rematches or conference matchups in the first round or 2, UCLA is going to have to get a signature win with another potential win over Wisconsin. Now, what Wisconsin would bring if UCLA is to play them, I know it's a couple of days away. There's still a game to play, then a Wisconsin game, and then we find out who UCLA would play. What would a Daimar do in that game? He already feasted on the Badgers. Even though Wisconsin is one of the better players in the country, they've got some very high-scoring guards, high-scoring play. I would love to see how the Bruins play at a neutral court. Even though they already won, that wouldn't bode well. I would love to see how that goes in round 2. But so far, UCLA in the Big Ten tournament, they don't need to win it, but one signature win, just going 1-1. Cronin does not like conference tournaments, doesn't want to go all out for them, especially after 2 years ago, he lost Jalen Clark in the regular season finale and then lost to Dem Bona in the Pac-12 tournament semis versus Oregon, which cost them a run deep into the tournament. He'd be okay, I think, with a 1-and-done or a 2-and-done. Get back, enjoy Selection Sunday from the comfort of your couch as opposed to doing it in Indianapolis. We'll see if Cronin does something weird or goes for 1 win and then decides to There's so many things. It's a weird game that you want to play where you play to win this week, but you don't want to play 3 games in 3 days because you don't have to do that. UCLA does not need to improve the resume that much. They don't. They're in the tournament. They want to avoid falling to the 7, and they're probably going to stay as a 6 seed with a very slim chance that they move to a 5, stay in the West Coast, which is where they're at right now. Less travel in an overrated team in the second round that's got a higher seed than the Bruins. That is gold for the Bruins if they get deep into the NCAA tournament. That is exactly what they want. Now, how it plays out over the next week, well, it's March Madness, so nothing expected is going to happen. UCLA could as easily lose to Northwestern in their quarterfinal matchup as they could winning the Big Ten tournament. Unlikely for both. We'll see how it plays out. Speaking of what played out, the UCLA women, should they be the number 1 overall team in the country? Should they be the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament? Those two things are somewhat clashing between national pollsters again and what the selection committee might do versus what projections are showing. Let's talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. This week's Armada and Clear Cut Team of the Week, we're going to tell you. We're going to tell you what it is because you think about the Armada Team of the Week, and they're brought to you by our friends at Nissan, the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. And each week, our Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From the unexpected upsets, top-seeded stars, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. And so far, this week's Armada and Clear Cut Team of the Week, the Duke Blue Devils. All right, John Shire's team, led by National Player of the Year candidate Cooper Flagg, just ripped through the ACC, going 19-1. The Blue Devils were plus 434 points in ACC games, the largest point differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky in the mid-1950s. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Duke Blue Devils have done here. It's clear that our team of the week is ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, and just like you can with the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan outstanding vehicles, take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, second segment. What does UCLA on the women's side have to do to get the number 1 overall respect they deserve? Initially, it's been granted to them by the NCAA Tournament top 16 revealed twice that they're the overall number one team. Bracketology for a long time had from Charlie Cream as the UCLA's number one overall seed. Watching the game on Sunday, it felt like winner of UCLA USC in the Big Ten tournament game with how things played out would lead to be the number one overall seed, right? UConn has been running hard at the end of the year, dominating the Big East, but USC's win at UConn, UCLA's win at South Carolina, mixed with Notre Dame's fall, Texas getting blown out by South Carolina to lose 2 out of 3 in their 3-game set. It seemed like UCLA USC would decide a top 1, 2, or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament overall. All right, USC I'm pretty sure is fairly certain to be a 1 seed. UCLA is guaranteed to be a 1 seed, but the number 1 overall seed, that respect factor, we are the team to beat. We're not going to get screwed with a tough team in our bracket earlier than the Final Four. Not that the Elite Eight won't be tough for the Sweet 16, but there's a difference between being the 1 seed and getting stuck with Notre Dame as your 2 or 3 seed, and there's a difference between getting somebody who hasn't beaten 3 of the top 10 teams in the country, okay, earlier than the Final Four, earlier than the Elite Eight. Well, after that UCLA-USC game, I was really shocked to see how things would go. After the voters released the AP poll, UCLA was the number 1 overall team in the country. That's still with voters keeping UCLA as low as 4 because they doubt the Bruins, and I'm still shocked, quite frankly. They beat a top 3 team, top 2 team in the country, in my mind, in USC, on the road, all the way from home, in a neutral site on the road in terms of travel. Then you have their win against South Carolina. They went through the Big Ten with ease, dominated an Ohio State team with a lot of points, defeated them by like 30. And with South Carolina, in this latest bracketology reveal, I just don't understand how UCLA could have beat them by 15 to 20 points, dominated the entire 40 minutes in November, and how USC went to go beat UConn at UConn. They led that big, and they let UConn get back in it. Don't let the final score forget USC dominated that game against UConn too. Now, Notre Dame went to USC. They led for the majority of the game. That was played, though, for USC without Kennedy Smith. That's a key thing to note. Still early, but Notre Dame has slipped as of late, so that win isn't going to hold as much weight for them to jump back into a 1-seed conversation. So UCLA, USC have 2 wins over teams they're competing with for top seeds overall, and yet we're forgetting that they even happened, all right? I know this is Locked On UCLA. I'm not really petitioning for USC, but then you're like, dude, what's going on? UConn is currently slotted as a potential 2 seed in a regional with Texas. Crazy. USC, a 1 seed. They might have NC State, okay? Notre Dame, a 2 seed in the UCLA regional. What's the difference there? TCU is a 2 seed in South Carolina. Of all those 2 seeds, I think TCU is really good, but I think they're the worst out of the 4. And that's like splitting hairs, but Notre Dame, I think that's a scary guard matchup. And UCLA, with the way they've turned the ball over at some points, I'm not sure they want a guard matchup like Notre Dame, even though I'd like to say they're better. Could be a scary matchup late in the tournament in an Elite Eight to set up a Final Four. As much as UCLA is the size to dominate, that'd be scary. Now they'd have LSU, they'd have Notre Dame. One of those two would knock each other out. That's just latest projections. But the difference there, you could see the regional that South Carolina is in would have Alabama, Ohio State, Duke, Iowa, Vanderbilt, TCU. Okay, you see some Big Ten teams in there. You see a lot of beatable teams. UCLA would involve a scrappy Utah team, a Baylor team, Tennessee who beat UConn, LSU, Notre Dame. That seems a lot tougher than what South Carolina would be given, considering they're the number 1 overall seed. So there's small things where you can set yourself up for success. Now, I do believe UCLA is the best team in the country. They were able to finally crush that USC bug, if you will. They've already defeated South Carolina earlier in the year. I just am shocked where, after all the disrespect, now the pollers didn't all give UCLA love, but enough realized, hey, UCLA, based on the point system, they are number 1 team in the country with a lot of split voting, all right? This was a split majority for UCLA getting into the number 1 spot overall in the country. And after all the NCAA reveals, are they number 1 in the overall rankings? Are they a second number 1 seed? Do they have to play USC earlier in the tournament, right? Round 4? Could that be in the Final Four when I think those 2 teams are 2 of the best in the country? I think UCLA is deserving. They have one of the best post players in the country. Kiki Rice is one of the most dominant point guards. Now she is elite or as flashy as Hidalgo. You mix in Paige Beckers. You mix in, obviously, Juju Watkins in terms of guard play. But UCLA's got a solid backcourt, a solid front court, and some depth. A lot of depth, more than these teams are running out. UCLA, while they might not all be stars, they can run in 9 players in a big game, and they made pretty big contributions, or they made contributions over the course of the weekend when the Bruins won 3 games in 3 days. And yet, here UCLA is, yes, they're going to be the 1 seed. They're hosting the first 2 rounds at Poly. They get to go to Spokane. All right, just forget the last time they went to Spokane was the same year UCLA broke their all-time wins record and things went bad because Gonzaga was involved. All right, like, okay, the location-wise will be fine. They have a path in hosting the first round, staying on the West Coast, and they won't have to really travel until the Final Four if they can continue to make their first Final Four run in the NCAA era of women's college basketball. It just seems like they're still getting disrespected. And we're splitting hairs here, but I just don't understand how you don't bring into consideration, yes, I know South Carolina's not the same team they were in November, but you have to give that head-to-head. It's one thing if it was a 2-point loss or a buzzer beater or a heave, went to overtime, but like UCLA dominated that game. And I just, in my mind, have not respected South Carolina in the comparison to UCLA only since. Now, they've come a long way. They have come a long way, and they've dominated Texas twice. Texas has gotten a lot of love for barely beating South Carolina at home when South Carolina has dominated Texas twice. You could argue Texas is overrated. UConn is really coming on strong, but they've taken a couple of losses. Okay. You see some other teams as well. It's just, why? Why? I get frustrated when we don't clearly realize there's more of a case to be made for that team across town to be the top team in the country than there is for any other team other than 2 teams from Los Angeles. That's my perspective. The only 2 teams who I think are the top 2 teams in the country are the teams in Los Angeles, the greatest Los Angeles area. Westwood, downtown LA, those are the only 2 teams I think should be in consideration with how things have played out. Notre Dame had a claim, but they've fallen off the map and they've lost their claim. They have some of the best wins in the country. It's ridiculous. Now, again, we saw what UCLA did with their players-only meeting. Take the disrespect, come out, dominate those first 2 rounds, do the same thing in the Sweet 16, and when things get tough in the Elite 8 and beyond, that's when UCLA can prove this team is different. This is the team of destiny, and they are truly the best. And let's not forget, in 2026, this team is going to be even better. Even better. So why not go back-to-back? Start with this year. Still a long week to wait for Selection Sunday and some conference tournaments to play out, but all the big tournaments, all the big ones have mostly wrapped up. It's going to be a week of media jostling, a lot of politicking. Like, hey, we're the 1 seed. It should be clear-cut. I don't understand why it's a debate, but it still is. Next, let's go over some spring sports, if you will. All right, baseball, softball, what are they doing? Top 10 for one and a Big Ten opening weekend series to remember for another here on Locked On UCLA. Attention, Locked On UCLA fans. Have you ever wished you could directly support the players at UCLA and be a part of the journey overall? Now you can with Roy, an NIL app that puts you, the fans, in control. What can we do about it? Well, you get to choose the player you want to support, all right? You can decide how much you want to give, a lot, a little, everything matters. And you can get exclusive content straight from the athletes that you back. It's not like it's a deal handled behind closed doors like at the beginning of the NIL age. You could support the players you directly love and support them and make a real impact to feel closer with getting the content directly from them. And if in this transfer portal day and age, you're like, I don't like this, you can get your money back, and it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of UCLA sports. Download the Roy app from the App Store and start backing Bruin athletes, UCLA athletes, the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. All right. Here we go. We're talking some UCLA baseball. All right. So this is a UCLA baseball team that after an interesting start to the year, they got to Texas. They had a sweep of the opening weekend. They played some Big Ten teams in a row, but this was their first official Big Ten week. All right. first Big Ten weekend. So they went to Maryland, they went to College Park, and this is after UCLA had played Michigan on a Tuesday, SC on a Sunday, hosted the SoCal College Baseball Classic at Jackie Robinson Stadium. All right, so what does this UCLA baseball team look like when they're heading to Maryland? All right, well, right now their record is 12-4, and if you didn't really know what happened over the week, UCLA dominated Michigan 22-5 a week ago in their midweek. Now UCLA does play a significant one against UC Irvine, weather permitting. We'll see if that plays. I'm not sure if it will. UCLA dominated Michigan. So that's 2 wins over Big Ten teams. Won't count towards the Big Ten standings. They get the job done. Now they go to Maryland. They're struggling early against the Terrapins. All right, they're down 5-0 heading to the 7th. 5-3 heading into the 9th. And then, oh, by the way, with 2 outs, Rock Chalowski, 3-run bomb. 3-run bomb to cap a 5-run comeback in the top of the 9th overall in the game. They're up 6-5. All right, so this team's got some heart. Not so fast because Maryland hits a solo bomb in the bottom of the 9th. UCLA, though, top of the 10th inning, had gotten rid of their DH, had a youngster pitcher who had started throwing, had to hit with 2 outs in the 10th to keep the rally going. Wyland Moss base it up the middle. Next thing you know, the Bruins score. And this was with 2 outs on the top of the 10th. With the pitcher hitting, with the DH gone, base hit, they get a base hit, a walk, and then a salami to score 6 in the top of the 10th. After being down 5-0, they won at 12-6 in the 10th. So huge win for the Bruins, who've had the ability to come back from big deficits in their opening Big Ten game. Now, Saturday was a setback and a beatdown in 7 innings. In the Big Ten, if you're down 10 within 7 innings, they cut it short, all right? It's not something we're used to in West Coast ball, but in the Big Ten, automatic rules, if it's a 10-run game, UCLA, they'll cut it short. Now, against Maryland on Sunday in a rubber match, key game for UCLA, 11 runs in the top of the 2nd inning, all right? 11 runs in the top of the 2nd inning. And next thing you know, you're like, wow, that's crazy. Like, what's UCLA doing with 11 runs in the top 2nd inning? Well, they ran away with it in an 11-5 win on a Sunday morning affair on the West Coast to take down Maryland. So now the Bruins are 12-4. You look at the Big Ten standings, and this is where they sit. UCLA 12-4, unranked, 8-2 at home, 2-2 in road games, and 2-0 in neutral site games, 7-3 in their last 10. Oregon, the only team that swept the opening weekend of Big Ten play. Ironically, who'd they sweep? USC. So they're at the bottom. You got Iowa, Michigan, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA, Washington, all teams with 2-1 records, and still 3 teams that have yet to play a Big Ten conference series. It's going to be crazy. UCLA doesn't play every team in Big Ten play, but there still is a lot to desire for this UCLA team. They've showed some heart, got some early wins. I wonder what the starting staff is going to do when it gets tough, but Rock Chalowski is a baller, and there's been a lot more heroes to talk about within then. So I like the start, and remember, this team is coming off one of their worst years in years, right? One of the worst seasons in 2024. It was embarrassing with how UCLA went out without a bang in the Pac-12 era in the spring sports, all right? Other than men's volleyball winning national championship, baseball, that's frustrating. Good to get a strong series win at Maryland. Tough place to play earlier in the college calendar, right? When you go east and it's early March, it's a little up for grabs there. But now the Bruins don't have to leave the West Coast until they go play Purdue in late March. In late March, heading into April in West Lafayette. They play LMU, they host Indiana, they host Nebraska. If they can get the weather, if the weather provides, they might even get a game against the top 20 UC Irvine team in. A lot of craziness still to go, but that's what's going on so far for UCLA on the baseball side. Now, softball, what is that? What's going on with them, right? This is a team that had a very tough schedule to start. Team that was ranked as high as number 4 in the country, if I'm not mistaken, on the various polls. UCLA 23-4 overall. They had a curse with 3 straight weekends, did Kelly Inouye Perez's squad. That 3 straight weekends, they ended the Sunday finale or Saturday finale with a 1-run loss in the last inning. A couple of which they were leading heading into the last inning. Now, this last couple of games, UCLA's been able to play at home, play in the West Coast, and this is what the Bruins are able to do. Play LMU, run rule them. Play Sac State, run rule them. Play Sac State again, San Diego State, a San Diego State team that took the current undefeated, seemingly never beaten Oklahoma Sooners into extra innings, like extra innings. So they fought Oklahoma to extra innings. San Diego State, a team that at one point was receiving votes, doing good, although the Aztecs had lost quite a few games in a row the last couple of weekends. UCLA won 5-0 at San Diego State, where it was a record crowd down at San Diego State Softball Stadium. And what did they do? What did UCLA respond? Mind you, Oklahoma gave up like 6 runs in 9 innings, but 6 runs, including when their game was on the line. They gave up a run. UCLA had Taylor Tinsley throw a no-hitter, second career no-hitter against a scrappy San Diego State team over the course of 7 innings in a sold-out crowd with UCLA there down in San Diego. So one of the best wins of the weekend came with UCLA facing all the fans, all the Aztec Nation, and their starting pitching, which hasn't always been the clutches in the circle this year, comes through and throws a no-no. You mix in another beatdown of LMU, this time on the road on a Sunday afternoon, and then eventually against the Toreros, they might get a game in before they start Big Ten play. And the softball team is starting Big Ten play a weekend later than the baseball team is. So far pretty good. UCLA number 7 in the country, showcasing a little more promise. But I wonder what they're going to look like in Big Ten play. I'm expecting dominance. Oregon is right behind them in the standings in Big Ten play in the rankings. And that's just all SEC teams in the top 6. Of course, they're going to get a lot of bias, a lot of love. Doesn't help that Oklahoma and Texas, the top 2 teams in the country, move to the SEC. So it just gets even more SEC bias. But until somebody knocks Oklahoma off the perch, it's not really SEC. It's just Oklahoma, a little bit of Texas, and everybody else. UCLA is good, but are they good enough to knock off the Sooners? Are they good enough to knock off Texas? Can they win those close games late? They won a good West Coast game against a mid-major team on the West Coast, no hitting them, who Oklahoma struggled with earlier in the season. And I think Oklahoma is beatable this year. They swept South Carolina and only won one-run games at home all weekend in their first SEC series. They barely took Long Beach State to 11 innings to win 2-0. So that seems like a beatable Sooner team that's, 22-0? And UCLA has some strong wins and some comeback ability, but they're in the stretch of a dominant part of the schedule where I think they can win 10 in a row. We'll learn what Purdue brings. We'll learn what UCLA will do against Iowa. They'll host Purdue. They go to Iowa City. They'll go to the East Coast to play Howard and Maryland, CSUN, UC San Diego. That's like their next couple of games. This could be a strong stretch where if UCLA is dominant, go win your 15 games in a row and get yourselves back to a 2 seed. Get yourself clinched to host a super regional round as well as a regional, and they'll be set to go. Still a lot to go with, a lot more to talk about. It is March Madness, so we're going to expand more basketball stuff over the next couple of weeks and spring football around the corner. But hey, that's your spring sports update. UCLA softball dominant, 5 wins in a row, and then baseball wins their first Big Ten series ever. It's a good start. It's a good start. Meanwhile, it's getting closer to Big Ten tournament time. More projections, more things are going to change leading into the NCAA tournament. We're going to have coverage every single day leading up to Selection Sunday. Heads up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.